Have you noticed your grocery bills getting scarier than a horror movie? You're not alone. Food prices have gone through the roof, and it's enough to make anyone lose their appetite. Think about this. In the past year, the cost of basic foods like eggs and bread has jumped by over 20%. That's insane. It's like someone replaced your usual grocery store with a fancy restaurant, but without the fancy atmosphere or attentive waiters. Please click the subscribe for more financial information. This isn't just a minor inconvenience. Walmart is now expensive. Dollar store expensive. Thrift store are expensive. Millions of families are struggling to put food on the table because of these outrageous prices. People are having to make tough choices between paying rent and feeding their kids. It's a crisis, plain and simple. So what the heck is going on? Why are we suddenly paying a king's ransom for basic groceries? Buckle up, because we're about to dive into the messy world of food prices and uncover the forces behind this economic nightmare. Remember the good old days when you could actually rely on grocery stores to have food? Yeah, those days seem about as distant as dial-up internet right now. The global supply chain, which is a fancy way of saying how food gets from the farm to your fork, is totally messed up. Think of it like a game of mousetrap, but instead of a plastic boot kicking everything over, it's a global pandemic, labor shortages, and sky-high fuel costs causing chaos. Trucks sit idle because there aren't enough drivers, ships are stuck at sea, and grocery stores can't get the supplies they need. This perfect storm of disruptions has created a massive bottleneck, making it more expensive and difficult to get food where it needs to be. So, the next time you're staring at an empty shelf at the supermarket, you can thank the global supply chain for letting you down. Remember all that talk about inflation and interest rates that you probably tried to ignore? Well, it turns out that economic stuff actually matters, especially when it comes to food prices. When inflation is high, like it is now, everything gets more expensive, including the ingredients, packaging, and transportation needed to get food to your plate. It's like a never-ending game of price tag whack-a-mole, with costs popping up faster than you can swat them down. To make matters worse, the war in Ukraine has disrupted global markets for key commodities like wheat and fertilizer, further driving up prices. It's a complicated mess, but the bottom line is this: when the economy is struggling, our wallets feel the pain, especially at the grocery store. Here's a fun fact. Climate change isn't just bad for the planet, it's also wreaking havoc on our food supply. We're talking extreme weather events like droughts, floods, and heat waves that are becoming more frequent and intense. These disasters can wipe out entire crops, forcing farmers to charge more for what little food they can salvage. Remember the lettuce shortage a few months back? Yeah, that was climate change showing off its destructive power. But wait, there's more bad news. Climate change is also messing with the delicate balance of ecosystems, making it harder for crops to grow and increasing the spread of pests and diseases. It's like Mother Nature is playing a cruel game of how much can we mess with the food supply. And guess who's stuck paying the price? Yep, that's right, us. Section 5, Empty Plates, How High Prices Hurt Us All. Okay, so we've established that food prices are high and rising. But what does that actually mean for everyday people? Well, for millions of families, it means making impossible choices between putting food on the table and keeping a roof overhead. Food banks and pantries are being stretched to their limits as more and more people turn to them for help. These organizations are working tirelessly to meet the growing need, but they can't do it alone. The sad reality is that high food prices hit the most vulnerable among us the hardest. Low-income families, seniors living on fixed incomes, and single parents already struggling to make ends meet are being pushed to the brink. This isn't just a problem for those struggling to afford food, it's a societal issue that affects us all. When people can't afford to eat, it impacts their health, education, and overall well-being, creating a ripple effect throughout our communities. Section 6, Fighting Back. What can we do about this? Okay, I know what you're thinking. John, you've just spent the last few minutes outlining all the reasons why food prices are out of control, and now I'm terrified. Is there any hope, or are we all doomed to a life of ramen noodles and tap water? Well, before you start building a bunker in your backyard and hoarding canned goods, take a deep breath. The situation is serious, but it's not hopeless. There are things we can do, both individually and collectively, to fight back against rising food prices and create a more just and sustainable food system. So, how do we tackle this beast of a problem? Well, it's going to require a multi-pronged approach, with governments, businesses, and individuals all playing a part. Think of it like a superhero team-up, but instead of capes and superpowers, we've got policy changes, sustainable practices, and smart consumer choices. Section 7. Government action policies for a more stable food system. All right, let's talk about what our elected officials can do to address this crisis. First and foremost, they need to get serious about tackling climate change, which is a root cause of many of the problems we're seeing in the food system. That means investing in renewable energy, promoting sustainable agriculture, and holding polluters accountable. It's time for our leaders to stop treating climate change like a distant threat and start acting like the fate of our food supply depends on it, because it does. But it's not just about addressing long-term challenges. We also need immediate action to alleviate the current crisis. Governments can provide financial assistance to struggling families, increase funding for food banks, and implement price controls on essential food items. These are just a few examples, but the key takeaway is that our leaders need to step up and prioritize food security for all. Section 8. Personal choices, eating smarter in tough times. Now let's see what the Bible says about such times. In Proverbs 21:20 it says, "The wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down." This verse highlights the importance of prudence and preparation, especially in times of scarcity or rising prices. Now let's talk about what we can do as individuals to navigate this challenging landscape. I know it can feel overwhelming, but even small changes in our shopping and eating habits can make a difference. One obvious strategy is to become a savvy shopper. Look for sales, buy in bulk when possible, and don't be afraid to compare prices at different stores. And here's a radical idea. Plan your meals ahead of time to avoid impulse purchases and reduce food waste. I know it sounds crazy, but trust me, it works. Beyond shopping smart, we can also explore alternative food sources. Community gardens, farmers markets, and even growing your own fruits and vegetables can be rewarding and cost-effective ways to put food on the table. And hey, if all else fails, we can always embrace our inner college student and master the art of the budget-friendly meal. Ramen noodles, anyone? I'm kidding, sort of. Section 9. A brighter future, hope for affordable food. So, after all that doom and gloom, is there any reason to be optimistic about the future of food? Well, despite the challenges we face, I believe there's always hope. Human ingenuity and resilience have a way of surprising us, and I'm confident that we can find solutions to these complex issues. But it's not going to happen overnight, and it's going to require all of us to work together. We need to demand action from our leaders, support sustainable practices, and make conscious choices in our own lives. The fight for food justice is far from over, but I believe that by working together, we can create a world where everyone has access to safe, affordable, and nutritious food. After all, food is more than just sustenance. It's a basic human right, and it's time we start treating it that way. So let's roll up our sleeves, get to work, and build a better food future for ourselves and generations to come. We've got this. Please click the subscribe for more financial information.